Hello, I'm Anna Maria Tremonti, and this is The Current. If the enemy of my enemy is my friend, then the United States and Iran may be about to shuffle into untested social circles. Washington and Tehran don't agree on much, but they both see the militants of ISIS, the Islamic State of Iraq and Syria, as a real threat. As both countries consider how to respond to ISIS taking over key Iraqi territory, including now its largest oil refinery, one option is to cooperate. It is unusual in the extreme for the interests of Iran and the United States to align, but some think the ISIS menace could actually present an opportunity to reimagine relations between the two countries after 40 years of hostility. Ali Nourizadeh was a journalist in Iran at the time of the revolution. He fled in 1981. He is now the director of the Center for Iranian and Arab Studies in London, England. Tricia DeGennaro is a senior fellow at the World Policy Institute. She specializes in U.S. foreign policy and international security. She's got extensive firsthand experience inside Iraq and Afghanistan. She's in our Washington studio. And John Mundy was Canada's last ambassador to Iran. He was expelled by the country in 2007. He is now a senior associate with the Center for International Policy Studies at the University of Ottawa. And John Mundy joins us from our Ottawa studio. Hello, everyone. Welcome.
Hi. Hello.
Hi.
Hi, Anna Maria.
Ali Nourizadeh, let's begin with you. Should the United States and Iran be cooperating over the crisis in Iraq?
For sure. I think it's the time. It's a golden moment for the rapprochement, and I think the Iranians are understanding that the danger is not just something remote. It's close by. They are getting closer to the Iranian border. The Iranian made a lot of mistake in Iraq by just supporting Maliki, intervening, preventing the election take its natural place. When Dr. Ayad Allawi won the election, the Iranian threatened, and unfortunately the Americans surrendered and accepted Maliki as the prime minister. And that during the past 4 years, the Iranian made mistake after mistake by keep supporting Maliki, although they have received warning from their Kurdish friends, from other friends like Hakim, like Muqtada Sadr, that they shouldn't stick to Maliki. They should let the Iraqi people, the Shia, they choose a different person. They refuse. Now they realize that. On Wednesday night, the Supreme National Council had a very important meeting in which Mr. Rouhani expressed for the first time that it's the moment for us to just let Maliki go. And some of the Revolutionary Guards commander, some of them like Ali Shamkhani, Rear Admiral Ali Shamkhani, who is Secretary of National Supreme Council, he agreed with Rouhani, and Shamkhani is from Khuzestan, he is from Arab tribes, and he knows Iraq very well. So he said we should give up Maliki and let Adel Abdul Mehdi or Chalapi or any other one to become prime minister, and 90% of the problem will be solved.
Okay, well, let me before...
they also reach the same conclusion, and that's why the two countries can work together.
Okay, well, that gives us a really good perspective on what the Iranian thinking is. Tricia DeGennaro, how significant an opportunity is there to change the relationship between Washington and Tehran with what's going on then?
It's extremely significant. I think this is the next step we can start moving towards. In addition to the P5+1 conference and the discussions on the nuclear facilities there, Iran has made some really strident steps, and I think that it's very important for us to take the next milestone. And in addition to that, I don't think any of us want to continue to see this instability, nor this group gain any more territory or power or influence in the region.
Okay, the P5+1 is the permanent 5 members of the United Nations Security Council +1, which is Germany talking to Iran, right?
Correct.
On nuclear stuff.
Yes.
And John Mundy, what kind of potential do you see for real change in the relationship between the U.S. and Iran because of what's going on in Iraq?
Well, Anna Maria, there's no question that Iranian interests in Iraq and American interests in Iraq are overlapping. Neither country wants to see the extremist Sunni groups take over that country. So there's the potential for cooperation, what I would call geopolitical cooperation between the two countries in Iraq. The potential is also there in Afghanistan. But I think we should be careful not to overstate it. I don't think the United States and Iran are suddenly going to become close allies. There is too many disputes between the two countries to do that. But there is a scope for cooperation between the two countries, and there's even a division of labor that you can see between the two countries in Iraq, because Iran would use its Revolutionary Guard to help solidify and train Iraqi government elements to oppose ISIS. The United States would use its air power.
But Patricia, we just heard what Ali was saying about what they're kind of thinking in Tehran and the various factions. Do Tehran and Washington want the same thing, even if they don't like the same people?
Well, I'm not sure they want exactly the same thing, but they do want they do want stability in the region, and they don't want these Sunni extremists. So those are at least two overlapping interests. In addition, I think this is definitely geopolitical alignment because we're really seeing a lot of also movement throughout the region as far as energy goes, as far as oil and gas and natural resources. So I think in these instances, yes, they can, they do want the same thing. I think what the difference is that Iran probably is going to push for more influence in the region, and the U.S., of course, doesn't want that. So that's going to be kind of the leveling factor, or I would say the pause a little bit on this side of the ocean as to whether or not we should, how we should move forward and how quickly that forward movement should go.
Ali Nourizadeh, I want to clarify what you were saying about how different Iranian leaders are seeing Mr. al-Maliki in Iraq. Do they want to cut him loose, or do they just want to pull him into a different kind of control?
Well, let me, Anna Maria, first of all, point out that there is two very major points we should always consider in our analysis. First of all, there is no animosity against United States towards the Iranian. Maybe the government uses this death to America, for certain purposes. But the Iranian people as a whole, majority of the Iranian, they like American. They would like to have good relations. They want to resume relations. There are 3.5, 4 million Iranians living in the United States. Their parents, their relatives, they want to be able to go and visit them. So there is no animosity. That's a very important issue. The regime made this animosity to international community that there is the Iranian hating American. They don't. They love America. Second of all, there are 14 million Sunni Iranian inside Iran. Most of the border towns is occupied by the Sunnis. Sunnis living there. So the Iranians, they know the danger of sending troops to Iraq. They know very well that if they open the gate of the hell, it's going to backfire, it's going to come to home, and the Iranian regime will lose and suffer. And when we are talking about Mr. Maliki, 90% of the Iraqis, they don't want Maliki. The Iranian insisted that Maliki is the best candidate, the best choice. But now they realize that, and Mr. Rouhani from the beginning, even as far as the Syria concerned, he was for looking for an alternative, maybe Farouk al-Shar, his deputy, to become next president. But Ayatollah Khamenei believes that this is his war. Khamenei look that he is going to be the leader of Muslim world, and that's the rivalry between him and Saudis. This is something which the nations, Iraqi, Lebanese, Syrian, all of them are paying a dear price for it because of this rivalry. The Saudis condemn Daesh. They never helped Daesh, although we hear a lot of story, but Daesh is their enemy number one. they don't like Maliki, as they issued in the latest statement. And the Iranian, they realize that. So keeping to one person and sacrificing everything, it's not in the interest of Iran. Therefore, for the first time, we see that the reality is taking place. The Iranian coping with the fact that majority of the Iraqis, whether Kurds, Sunni, Shiite, they don't like Maliki. And Mr. Nichirvan Barzani, Prime Minister of Kurdistan province, said it in Tehran and said it in Erbil that Maliki should go. And I think now is the time, and the Iranians are losing. They are ready to hear the alternative. They are ready to cope with different person. Mr. Adel Abdul Mehdi is a Shia leader from Hakim Group. Then we have also Mr. Ahmed Chalapi and others, and even Dr. Jafari. And the Iranian, they have very good relation with all of them.
Okay, but Patricia DeGennaro, you see this as a real opportunity. I mean, we've just heard of different interests there, but you see this as a real opportunity for the United States to change that relationship with Iran that has been so hostile.
Yes, I think it is a real opportunity. I think what needs to be done, though, and I don't think that the U.S. will I would hope that the U.S. would not miscalculate again in the fact that how delicate the internal relationships have been in the past and have been pushed over the last several years by Maliki between the Sunnis and the Shiites. I think we really have to understand that and make sure that there is an equal opportunity. And I mean, this may be a good way to really get sustainability and have Iran, sit back a little bit. They don't want Maliki, but maybe, we need to have a different type of leadership there, and the Iraqis need to decide that. But the first step is to calm the violence.
John Mundy, I'm wondering, there are a couple of other factors here. Iran is a backer of Hezbollah. Iran has been backing Assad in Syria. There are several other pieces to the puzzle. How do you see that affecting this or not affecting it? What other kinds of things have to be thought about?
Well, that's a very good point. There are always in the Middle East many pieces to a puzzle, and it's very hard to put something together as a coherent policy in the region. I think for just that reason, because of Iran's support for Hezbollah, to a lesser extent Iran's support for Hamas, because there's some problems between Iran and Hamas at the present time, the United States is not going to jump into bed with Iran on this. But there is the potential for cooperation between the two countries. And it's useful, Anna Maria, just to go back more than a dozen years, because this is not the first time that Iran and the United States have cooperated on Iran's borders. Right after 9/11, when the United States decided to invade Afghanistan and eject the Taliban, which, of course, is an extremist Sunni group, the Taliban government from Afghanistan, the United States and Iran cooperated. Iran had very good political links with the Northern Alliance, and they helped the United States solidify a relationship with the Northern Alliance that allowed the Americans to overthrow the Taliban quite easily. And Iran also participated in the peace conference that created the Karzai government, the peace conference in Bonn after the successful invasion of Afghanistan. But what happened there, and this is why I think Iran is going to be careful in how it cooperates with the United States, is the United States took Iran's help, but soon after, essentially cut Iran loose, and that's the axis of evil speech.
That's what George Bush did shortly after all of that. Yeah. Interesting, because, Ali makes the point that the Iranian people love America, but if you look at what comes out of the United States, you hear kind of mixed messages. We've been hearing calls for cooperation with Iran from some surprising voices in Washington in recent days, including the Republican Senator Lindsey Graham. He has called the Iranian regime thugs in the past. Listen to what he said last Sunday, calling for a dialogue.
Why did we deal with Stalin? because he was not as bad as Hitler in our eyes. We need to all make sure Baghdad doesn't fall. So yes, we need a dialogue of some kind with the Iranians, but we also need to put them on notice. Don't use this crisis as a way to create a satellite state of Iraq controlled by Iran.
So, Tricia DeGennaro, what do you make of that comparison of Iran today to Stalin's Russia? How much of that is rhetoric or backing into stuff? What's he really doing there?
Well, far be it from me to say that Lindsey Graham has a good point there, but we have found other ways to deal with different sovereign nations in the past than we have most recently, and I think he is right about the discussion part. It's much more beneficial to sit down and have a dialogue to start moving this process forward. We've been using our military card way too often, and it's encouraged other people to do the same thing. And so I think this precedent of let's get talking and let's get our cards on the table is exactly the place to go. I think he is right by saying that Washington is nervous, and we would be nervous here about making Iraq a satellite state. And I think that comes back to the complexities of the Middle East, where you're going to have a very strong Israeli voice here, basically saying, we want to be right there by you, understanding how you're going to move forward. So to see how it affects us as well. But I'm sure they also are worried about this impact and where it could go through Jordan as well. So they could also want this moving forward. So therefore, it is, like the ambassador said, it's very complex. There are a lot of players here. There are a lot of movement. But if you really sit down and think about things, rationally, there's a lot of pieces that can move here to make a better situation and to get some stability so we can move forward in a more peaceful manner instead of using, our weapons all the time to solve our problems.
Ali Nourizadeh, what do you make of that concern that Iran could form a satellite state in Iraq?
Well, first of all, let me add to what Tricia said and John earlier on about the cooperation between Iran and United States. Yes, there was intelligence as well as military cooperation during Afghanistan invasion. When the American invaded Iraq, the Iranian took different strategy. God knows how many American soldiers were killed by side bomb, manufactured in Iran and given to the Shiite militia. And the Americans tried very hard in Iraq to cooperate with the Iranian, and they had certain meetings and talk and negotiation. But unfortunately, what the American aim was to leave Iraq and leave behind a sort of democracy without the Iranian intervention. But the American has given Iran on a golden plate given Iraq in a golden plate to Iran. They left Iraq, and in a way they let Iran to be the only player. All the Arabs, they looked at what American did with suspicion, and especially Saudis, they all saying that there is a conspiracy, the American conspire with the Iranian against the Sunni Muslim countries. So this is the time the American correct what they did in a way to assure Iranian that they are not, after regime changing, they don't want to use Iraq as a platform to invade Iran or attack Iran, cooperate with each other, and also to assure other Iraqi neighbors, Turkey, Jordan, Saudi Arabia, Kuwait, that there is no conspiracy. They all have to work together in order to bring peace to Iraq. Instead of fighting each other, they have to cooperate with each other.
Ali, I think we should be reminded, too, there's no country that's lost more young soldiers on Iraqi battlefields than Iran in the Iran-Iraq wars. You have a really, really awful history there of Shiite-Sunni fighting, huh?
Absolutely. We lost 500,000 soldiers. There are 250,000 maimed and 300,000 killed. We know that. We still have the wound. We don't want another war. The Iranians, they know that. Iran doesn't want another war. Involvement in Syria was a great mistake, and Iran paid a big price for it. And at the moment, there are lots of questions raised that why Ayatollah Khamenei decided to get Iran involved in Syria in such a level that Syrian people who loved us, I mean, I was in Syria, I saw how the people behaved. They hate us now. You talk to Syrian, they look at Iran as an occupier forces. So Iran has to rectify, they have to change their policy, their strategy. Iran is a great country, is a big country with educated people. We have capable hands in cooperating, helping to build to help Iraq, to help other countries, rather than always making problem and make our neighbors to look at us with suspicion that Iran wants to have a Shiite empire, and this is what they are doing.
But Tricia DeGennaro, do you think the U.S. has a moral imperative to intervene in the ISIS insurgency?
Well, I'll capitalize on what Ali said earlier. Is we kind of put a brick wall together without any cement and then left it. So we do have a little bit of responsibility. And we've sat back for a while watching the situation unfold, where Maliki has basically taken advantage of his position by marginalizing other sects, and therefore it's become an eye for an eye kind of issue. And I think, yes, the U.S. could have done a much better job at this. And these wounds go back long, and there's a long history, and we didn't do our homework. We dismantled the army. We left a lot of people vulnerable. Then, we had the Sunni awakening, and then we put the Shiites were very, very afraid when we left. So we gave them a lot more power, and we allowed all of those things to happen. So I think when you intervene at this level in a country, you have some responsibility in being able to do your homework and get in there and make some reparations.
We're almost out of time, but John Mundy, I want to ask you about Canada's perspective on all of this. ISIS is an organization that has started to recruit young Canadian men. We know that. What's Canada's role in all of this? What are the dangers you see?
Well, certainly one role is that we have to use all the levers possible to ensure that young Canadians are not being recruited by ISIS. Because that is going to be bad both for the region that we're talking about, but there's going to be blowback to Canada because these people potentially are going to come home again and be completely radicalized. So that's one thing. Another thing we can do is provide humanitarian assistance. That's a traditional role for us in this region of the world. But as far as weighing in on the potential for a deeper dialogue with Iran on these types of geopolitical issues, the Canadian government has a completely different position on that. The Canadian government just doesn't believe in dialogue with Iran. So I doubt whether we would have much influence over the political issues.
Do you see the Canadian government changing because of this crisis in Iraq and the sort of the feelers that have already gone out now with Iran and the United States?
Frankly, I don't. I think the Canadian position on dialogue with Iran is very clear, and it's being reinforced by Foreign Minister Baird in the last couple of days. So
they'll just abstain, essentially. They'll just stay out of this?
I think so.
Okay. And just briefly then, Ali Nourizadeh, where do you see it going? Do you see talks happening at a higher level in the coming days even?
Not in coming days, but in coming weeks and months. But I just want to add one point as what John said.
Only briefly, Ali. We're almost out of time.
Okay, I'm sorry. Okay. Next time.
Oh, okay, that'll be okay. Thank you very much. We have to leave it there. Ali Nourizadeh fled Iran after the revolution in 1979. He was a journalist. He left in 1981. He's now the director of the Center for Iranian and Arab Studies in London, England. Tricia DeGennaro is a senior fellow at the World Policy Institute. She specializes in U.S. foreign policy and international security. She joined us from Washington. And John Mundy was the Canadian ambassador who was expelled from Iran in 2007. He's now a Senior Associate with the Center for International Policy Studies at the University of Ottawa. So thank you to all of you because you offered us some real insights there. That is our program for today. Stay with Radio 1 for Q with Shion Gomeshi. Be sure to watch CBC Television tonight for The National with Peter Mansbridge. Now, as we continue talking about the fraught relationships between the United States and Iran, there was a difference at one point when the two countries met in the 1998 World Cup. Some called it the most politically charged game in World Cup history. Many expected bloody mayhem.
Header is by Stili! Ahmed Estili bringing the Iranians in the crowd to their feet.
I will tell you that I remember that game because it was playing up on the wall of a Damascus cafe in 1998. And I was sitting in that cafe while the World Cup of Iran going against the U.S. was playing in one part of the cafe, and in another corner there was a whirling dervish performing. The U.S. players were not especially happy to lose that match. It was a clean game, however, and they realized they'd scored a diplomatic goal by just competing against the Iranians. The game was so friendly, the Americans invited the Iranians to California a year and a half later for a rematch, and that ended in a tie with no hard feelings. We're going to leave you with a little of an American sports program documentary of the Pasadena Showdown for today's last word. I'm Anna Maria Tremonti. Thank you for listening to The Current.
An official crowd of 49,212. An incredible 49,000 of them cheering on Iran. Proof enough as to why Los Angeles is known as Tehrangeles.
Our American hosts have treated us very well. We haven't had any problems.
In general, the people of Iran and the United States have no problem with one another.
It bridges gaps and ties countries together sometimes, and hopefully we can do a little bit of that. Even though we lost in the World Cup to Iran, I think we furthered relations about 10 years in 90 minutes.
American nerves were calmed early in the second half, though, when promising midfielder Chris Armas equalised. And that's how it finished, a fitting result. And there was even talk of a rematch in Tehran.